So I really want to talk about the sort of combination and value of orchestration on top of SD-WAN, and then how do we convert this into what we call network as a service. And I'll try to give a few examples of actual deployments we've done. Starting from sort of what are the main challenges that we see in the service provider market in general today. And I think to a large extent, if you look at these attributes of moving into a digital marketplace and having sort of a selection at the click of a button, an ecosystem or a marketplace of capabilities where partners can onboard themselves and offer new services and capabilities, definitely autonomous network operations, and how do you scale out quickly. These should be fairly familiar when you actually look at it. This is how the hyperscale cloud providers operate today, although it is not probably a fair comparison because the complexity of a data center is a bit different from a multi sort of domain network. But this is definitely what we see and what we hear from all of our customers that service providers need to strive to. I think there's a general consensus and understanding in the market that if networks will continue to be operated as they are today, it's not a scalable approach, and over time, definitely with the complexity of networks, the need to increase bandwidth to add more services, and the reduction in ARPU, things just don't add up. So this is definitely one of the challenges we're trying to address. When you combine this with SD-WAN, I think these challenges start to become a bit more complex. So with SD-WAN, and I've seen some of the sessions before me, everyone sort of alluded to the same facts that first of all, there's a need to onboard new functions. SD-WAN by itself, connectivity is probably not enough. We need to be able to extend it to additional services, and this is where we need to onboard multiple different players and multiple different functions. We're still dealing with siloed platforms, so it will probably take time until we standardize the entire stack from IT, ordering, billing, and so on. And at the moment, every new service we need to introduce, and I'll show this a bit more later on, has a significant number of different siloed platforms that need to be addressed. There's a need to monetize that. At the end of the day, I think that the number one challenge for service providers today is how do they monetize these different services. So it's all about how do we introduce new services that could be monetized fairly efficiently and fairly quickly. Obviously, the need to simplify network operations, the way networks are operated today is probably not a scalable approach, and we need to introduce more and more automation and autonomous operations. And last but not least, and I've seen this in the previous two presentations as well, how do we move into a new type of customer experience? So self-service capabilities. Most enterprises today expect to order services in a digital manner, in a digital fashion, and not to start going through the traditional ordering process. So when we try to visualize this, obviously there's the bottom layer, which is the network layer itself. This is constantly being virtualized, software driven, and so on. This is not an area where we as Amdocs operate, where we're trying to assemble a very broad and extensive ecosystem around that. There's the traditional, what we call the business enablement layer, ordering, CRM, billing, and so on. And this is where there's a lot of investment around digitization of that layer as well. But when you try to visualize it today, one of the main challenges we have is that the connection in between the two is to some extent broken. It's definitely extremely complicated. So it's sort of this, what I like to call the spaghetti mess of a large number of manual steps, specifically customized processes and integrations. And every new service, every new type of operation, every new vendor you're trying to introduce into the ecosystem needs to be somehow fitted into this spaghetti mess. And this is, to a large extent, what we're trying to introduce is what we call a service-driven network layer or an open cloud network of how do we automate, how do we abstract the connection in between the layers, and how do we automate the process of tying in between the business enablement layer, the customer-facing layer, and the network itself. Because you can have an amazing business enablement layer, but if you're not able to properly connect those capabilities into the network, you're not going to be able to reap the business and the financial benefits, and vice versa. You can build an amazing virtualized and software-driven network. If you're not able to reflect those capabilities up into the business enablement layer, you will end up with just having network capabilities, but you won't translate those into services in the network. Obviously, this has to be a combination of different products and different services. This is, I think, exactly the challenge that NFV in the hybrid domain of how do we also tie this into the OSS domain comes into play. Now, since the session is somewhat related to SD-WAN, if we try to apply this to SD-WAN, and Amir, you should remember these slides. Some of them are the same ones from 2 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago, we were together on a similar panel in the SD-WAN summit in Paris. But when we look at the SD-WAN domain, and some of the previous speakers also mentioned the fact that I think a lot of deployments might have more than one vendor, and we're starting to see more and more customers that are actually looking to have multi-domain SD-WAN vendors, so we can have one or more SD-WAN controller. We definitely want to introduce several different VNFs for value-added services. And at the end of the day, you're going through a fairly complex process of tying each one of these functions into all the different aspects of portal, product catalog, ordering, billing, and so on. And this is exactly one of the challenges we've tried to address and simplify. We've actually launched exactly a year ago at this event what we call the Amdocs NFV SD-WAN package. So it's a pre-packaged solution that sort of provides a complete abstraction layer. Already comes pre-integrated with quite a few of the leading SD-WAN controllers in the market, and it's constantly being expanded to introduce more, and provides standard northbound TMF-based APIs to simplify the introduction process into portal, ordering, billing, and so on. And this is one of sort of the key building blocks we see, and I'm going to show you a few customer examples into what we call the evolution into NAS, into Network as a Service. So when we try to sort of visualize what are the required steps in this NAS evolution, it obviously starts from connectivity. So we're still talking about network service providers or communication service providers. So the actual connectivity and the underlying network is the basic foundation of it all. Then we're trying to introduce as much automation as possible. So this is where service agility, the ability to roll out services and deliver them in seconds or minutes and not days or weeks, and obviously self-service capabilities. And last but not least, we are trying to add more and more layers of value-added services. So this is where we can allow service providers to move higher up the value chain, to monetize their network better, and to offer additional capabilities beyond just basic connectivity. And I'll try to walk you through each one of these steps and the time we have remaining. So if we look at connectivity, this is basically the package I've just mentioned. So this is where we're trying to offer a complete package that will introduce several different SD-WAN vendors. And again, it's all about openness in a multi-vendor ecosystem. I think that one of the underlying principles of NFV and this entire transformation in the market we're seeing in general is to break down the traditional vendor lock-in and to allow as much openness and as much flexibility as possible. Different VNFs for different value-added services could be security or any other type of value-added services, although security are definitely some of the more common applications in the enterprise space. Obviously, different cloud or infrastructure options. We're definitely seeing a combination of both telco and private cloud as well as public cloud. And I will show an example of a recent customer deployment we're involved in. And how do we package all of this with the proper way and the standard northbound APIs to simplify the integration process into the existing IT stack, that upper digital or business enablement layer I've shown earlier. So this is sort of the underlying foundation for connectivity. As I've mentioned earlier, the ecosystem, the openness, the multi-vendor environment is one of the key aspects here, and we're definitely trying to introduce, and I think I've seen in the previous ENEA slide, sort of a nice analysis of the different SD-WAN vendors. We expect this to grow over time. We're constantly adding more and more vendors, and at the end of the day, the approach is, or the goal is to be able to allow service providers to have their own choice and to start with one vendor or multiple different vendors and quickly evolve from one into the other. The second element, as we've mentioned, is the self-service portal capability. This is where we are seeing more and more service providers that are expecting or have their own enterprise customers, not just the large enterprises, even smaller enterprise customers, move away from the traditional ordering process into them logging into a portal. Some of the network capabilities, obviously not all of them, are exposed to the customer, so the customer can first of all see what is the existing network, which sites are connected, what are the services and capabilities they have, but they can also easily order new services, connect new sites, modify certain elements of the network. For example, a pretty popular option we're seeing through our CSP customers is the need to switch in between firewall vendors as VNF. So you might have a specific firewall solution and you might want to switch from one vendor into the other rather than go through a complex ordering process. They'd like to have the option of going to a portal, select a different vendor, make sure that the automation platform also translates or sort of converts the entire configuration. This is, I think, the customer experience that our customers are expecting, and definitely the ability to see the different pricing options and the overall impact on their network. Last but not least, we're also seeing a need in the market to expand this into what we call VNF Marketplace. And I usually like, and I see, whenever I see a lot of phones coming up, I know that we have good slides, so keep doing that. But I think there's a good analogy in between the App Store we have, whether it's the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, and applications we're trying to introduce into the network. So we're seeing more and more customers where basically they expect the overall orchestration and automation platform not only to provide the automation for services, but also sort of to be a hub to actually purchase and order different applications and different VNFs. You can see here an example of something we're now introducing as we speak with one of our customers in APAC. So basically, it's categorized into different categories and different options. And basically, when you order a certain VNF or a certain service, you get sort of recommendation as to what are other services that could be available as well. Very similar to that concept. And I think that is one of the true benefits and one of the values that we're trying to introduce in terms of NFV in general is the ability to quickly try out new services, introduce services. If traditionally, if we look at our customers today, introducing a new type of service into the ecosystem, into the product catalog is a process that could take 9 to 12 months. And we're trying to cut that down into weeks and to be able to offer a much more agile solution to their enterprise customers. I've mentioned, and I think I've repeated the term ecosystem several times, and I think that most of the vendors in the NFV space have a similar slide. This is something we're constantly upgrading and updating and so on. And as you can see, we're trying to make sure that we can offer across the entire use case range, starting from virtual CP, enterprise, consumer-related applications, all the way through mobile core, edge computing, as well as across the different networking layers, starting from networking, value-added services, different infrastructures, obviously probes and assurance, which might not be as sexy as the actual service, but is a critical element of it, and obviously being able to run on any cloud management solution. It's all about offering this openness and being able to ensure that once you have that automation platform in place, you're not locked in, you're not limited in terms of the different functions you're using. I want to give you a few quick examples in the few minutes we have left of what we call NAS in action. I think this term is starting to become more and more widely used by different service providers. There are quite a few examples, whether it's Colt or Verizon or Vodafone or Telstra or others that are actually showcasing how they introduce those self-service capabilities and how they allow their customers. I want to focus on Comcast, which is one of the early deployments we did around SD-WAN and NFV. This is a network that is actually running in production for over 2 years now. And it started by Comcast realizing that they have a business challenge in the market. They were starting to lose market share on the enterprise side with their lack of ability to deliver quickly and in a cost-effective way IPVPNs, and this is where there was an immediate need to introduce SD-WAN services. It was definitely the first North American cable provider to offer SD-WAN services. It is a complete hybrid solution, so it includes our NFV orchestration, but it's also completely integrated and tied with the existing OSS, BSS stack, ordering, and so on. So it allows them to not only deliver new types of virtualized services, but it also ties in the entire operational aspects with their existing stack. As I've mentioned, it's something that is already running in production for quite some time. They are seeing significant benefits, and they started seeing those fairly quickly in terms of reduction of operational complexity. You can see here one of the KPIs, and there are other KPIs that haven't been shared publicly yet, but we're looking at over 65% reduction in the end-to-end processing time due to service orchestration automation. It's definitely something that allows them to scale out much faster and to introduce and to move very quickly from hundreds of customers a month to thousands of orders per month. And this is something that is now being constantly expanded into additional applications. Another interesting example, and this is definitely a good place to present this, SCS, I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with it. They're actually the world's largest satellite communication provider. Their offices are right across the street here. You know, it's a minute walk from here. And this is a project that we've announced a couple months ago. We are about to launch this commercially very soon. And basically, they are providing managed security services over SD-WAN links that are running over a satellite link. So it's for them, it was a way to move from their traditional proprietary network, very siloed, focused on connectivity. And for those of you who are a bit more familiar with the satellite communication space, by the way, we're also going to be with SCS and Apple Door on a panel tomorrow morning, and we're going to talk about this a bit more in detail. But connectivity prices in the satellite space are starting to reduce or to go down pretty quickly, and this is where they realize that they need to start generating more revenue creation opportunities. So it's about how do you expand into new vertical markets, how do you offer additional services that would increase the addressable market and would increase the revenue stream, and how do you introduce further automation in order to simplify that process and to reduce the operational complexity. So basically, we are running that package I've mentioned earlier that fully runs on Microsoft Azure as a public cloud infrastructure, so they do not actually need to rely on building their own telco cloud and their own data center. Everything including the orchestration solution, the SD-WAN controller, some of the VNFs, the sort of the multi-tenancy VNFs and the data center VNFs are running on Microsoft Azure. It also allows them, as a company that has global reach, to scale out very quickly and to optimize the network offering in between different regions. So with this, and I think I'll be right on time, I'd like to start concluding. Hopefully I was able to show sort of a broader view than just SD-WAN as a connectivity play. And this is exactly where what we call network as a service comes into play. For us, although it's a term, I don't think not everyone likes that term, but it is more about how do we make service providers more Amazon or Google or Azure-like. This is where we definitely see a strong need from service provider to introduce significant level of automation, which is the only practical way to be able to roll out and introduce a large number of different services. There's a strong need to ensure that whatever solution we apply is open and multi-vendor. We need to ensure we avoid the traditional lock-in. Differentiation through, again, a large number of value-added services and customer experience. This is key. And with a lot of service providers and with a lot of enterprises now reaching out directly and building their own SD-WAN solution, the only way service providers can really differentiate it is through customer experience. And last but not least is how do we accelerate time to market? I think I've been at this event for the past, I think, 4 years, and I think we've gone through the entire cycle of proving the feasibility of NFV, and now there are a lot of folks that still are sitting on the fence and have concerns of what does it take to introduce NFV, how does it impact the organization, what skill sets do I need? What we're trying to provide here to demonstrate is a very pragmatic approach, how you can start from a very well-proven, focused use case, deliver that fairly quickly, and provide very quickly measurable operational and business benefits. And once you see that in your own environment, it's much easier to justify further investments in this domain. So with this, I think we're right on time, and I'll hand it back to Amir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And